Oh my God, God save the Queen. Or is it the King? Oh my God, we'll find out later. Anyways, RIP to Her Majesty. Anyways, we've got a great show today. We're in the green room, and we are going to go reverse order for our introductions. Ross, where are you dialing in from or zooming in from today, and what are you talking about?
I'm in Midtown Manhattan, and just in town to launch my new book, Thriving on Overload. So
I thought you were in
Overload to talk about how we can thrive on way too much information.
I thought you were in Sydney. Oh my God, I didn't realize that. So welcome. I should have come see you. All right, you're in New York, live from New York. All right, Chris, where are you dialing in from, talking in from here? So
I'm in beautiful Santa Cruz, California today.
Ooh, look at that sexy voice. All right, what are we talking about today?
Hi there. I want to talk about two things today. The first one is what it's like to get absolutely hammered with Ray. And second of all, I think we should spend an inordinate amount of time talking about Vala's new sexy hairdo. I'm digging the spiky. So I want to talk about sexy men and getting drunk.
All right, welcome to the green room for DisrupTV. All right, back to you, Al.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on DisrupTV. My name is Vala Afshar. I'm the Chief Digital Evangelist at Salesforce and your co-host for the next hour. We welcome you to follow us on Twitter at DisrupTV Show. Send Ray, myself, our distinguished guests, your questions live using hashtag DisrupTV. It's my pleasure to introduce my co-host. He's the CEO and co-founder or founder of Constellation Research, Ray Wang. He's a best-selling author of Everybody Wants to Rule the World. He's a regular television business technology news contributor on Fox Business, Yahoo Finance, Bloomberg, and CNBC. In my humble opinion, he's one of the top futurists to follow on Twitter at RWANG0. Welcome, Ray Wang, to DisrupTV.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm here with Vala Afshar, the Chief Digital Evangelist for Salesforce. He's also the author of The Pursuit of Social Business Excellence. Executives around the world pay attention to every one of his inspirational, insightful tweets. And when he's not hosting, keynoting, or leading events at Salesforce, you can find him speaking on business TV outlets such as Bloomberg and posting insightful analyses on ZDNet. And of course, you'll be catching him at Dreamforce 22. So, hey, thanks a lot, Vala. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm doing especially great because, Ray, we've interviewed 901 guests on our show, and one of our favorites is our first guest. Christopher Lochhead is #1 Apple podcaster, 12-time #1 Amazon bestselling author of a number of books, including Niche Down and Play Bigger. His new book, titled Snow Leopard, Why Legendary Writers Create a Category of One, is what we're going to talk about on today's show. Chris has been an advisor to over 50 venture-backed startups, former 3-time Silicon Valley public company CMO. He serves as chief marketing officer of a software company, Mercury Interactive, which HP acquired for $4.5 billion. He's an awesome follow on Twitter at LOCHHEAD. Welcome back, Chris, to DisrupTV.
Vala, let's talk about that hair. So when did we decide to make the decision to go spiky?
I don't know why. I tell you, my 12-year-old son.
Did you lose weight too, or does it just make you look thinner?
I have been swimming a bit.
Yeah, no, I think you've been pumping it up. I think you pumped up your hair. You get in your body looking really sexy.
Thank you very much. Maybe the new glasses, clear glasses. I don't know. It's a combination of.
He's
Thank
getting
you for
ready
noticing.
for Dreamforce.
We're hosting a little get together. I think 150,000 in the next 10 days. So, yes, you have to be both physically and mentally fit for Dreamforce. That's for sure.
Well, it's working out for you, I think.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Well, Chris, hey, we want to at least talk about Snow Leopard, get a conversation about what's going on. But let's start here, though. I mean, you're like the maestro of publishing, right? You keep monetizing in ways like last year. You're like, hey, Ray, we can do this. We can crank out books every other month. Or like, I was like, wow, okay. And I sat there, I was munching on my burger, hanging out with you. We're figuring out all this stuff, and I was like, wow, this is a pretty cool model. But let's start there. I mean, you figured it out. You cracked the code on actually how to monetize in writing in a digital age where everything's free.
Yeah, it's interesting. I started podcasting 5.5 years ago. And everybody said, "Oh, podcasting, it's already over, and there's too many podcasts, and nobody's going to listen to two people talking for an hour about, you got to edit that shit down, and you shouldn't do it anyway." And rant. Well, neener nonner, number one. And then a year and a half ago, we started Category Pirates as a newsletter. And then we've now been spinning out these books, which we can talk about if you like. But same thing. Nobody pays for business content. Nobody's going to read a newsletter that's 7,000 words. Nobody reads anymore. They want memes. Well, as we said, I didn't check this morning, but last time I looked, we're the number 4 paid business newsletter on the planet. And so I guess the thing at the start is don't listen to anybody because they don't know what they're talking about. They really don't. And it's interesting. In the last couple of days, a friend of mine sent me an email from the very sad and decrepit people who run Fast Company. And Fast Company is now soliciting people to enter their draw to see if you can become one of the most innovative companies in the world. And they're only charging you $1,000 to enter. And if the judges select you, you get included in their spring issue. And so we're now at a point where traditional business media, particularly the tier 2 and tier 3 folks, are so pathetic that they do these pay for play things. And who knows whether they'll disclose it to their audience. The flip side of that is those of us in the native digital creator world are thriving. And so it's amazing to be literally living at a time where we're watching the old melt away and have literally no idea how to create value or revenue. And we're watching native digital creators emerge and become some of the most important thinkers in the world who are digital first.
Well, you certainly have always had a reputation of being a digital pioneer, an amazing storyteller. And in your new book, and I want to just jump into it if you don't mind, Snow Leopard by Category Pirates. It's believed to be the first writing book. You're trying to teach us how to write better, how to be great writers, ever written through a category design lens. And you write, when we talk about being great at anything, you write the word great implies competition. In order for you to be great, that means someone else has to be not great, which means the entire goal of becoming great is a never-ending cycle of comparing yourself to anyone and everyone around you, and then trying to figure out how you can outgrade them until the next person comes along, and you have to, again, outgrade again and again. You got this vicious cycle. So you said that unfortunately, as ridiculous as it sounds, this is how most writers spend their entire lives and careers comparing themselves to others in search of greatness. And ultimately, this book, you talk about you're forever stuck in this game of competition, but based on your experience, legendary writers, the ones who stand the test of time, do none of this. Can you explain a bit more about how legendary writers differentiate themselves from those who are chasing greatness their entire
Absolutely.
life?
So the very front of the book, we write, writers without niches are starving artists. Writers with niches are category kings. And so the most successful people in the world become known for a category they own. We don't become known brand. We become known for something category. And what we wanted to do specifically with Snow Leopard, Vala, was we did the largest category science research project ever done on business book sales. We licensed from our friends at Nielsen the data for all of the top selling nonfiction books for the last 20 years. And under very strict guidelines in terms of what we could and couldn't say about some of the data, because they didn't want data about specific books, by way of example. But and so we wanted to understand what was selling and what wasn't for several reasons. Number one, as writers ourselves, and Ray, to answer your question, the reason, quote, I can be so prolific is because it's not me. Category Pirates, to the best of our knowledge, is the first ever writing band in the business space. We're three guys who've made a commitment to ourselves and our readers to do this work on an ongoing basis. And there's been lots of duos in writing, and every once in a while trios, but it's very rare for there to be an ongoing trio, aka a band. So that's how we get to the prolific. But more importantly than that, we really wanted to understand why certain ideas tip and why others don't. Because if you understand that as a business person, you have a superpower, and that superpower is part of what we call category design. Number two, here's the aha for non-writers. We're living at a time where if you are a knowledge worker and or an intellectual capitalist, your ability to succeed in large part is a function of your ability to write. Because with work from home and work from anywhere, how you show up in Slack, on a text, or in an email matters more now than how you show up in person. And most people can't write. Most writers can't tell you why what they do works and why what they do doesn't work. And so we wanted to understand what are the big ideas that scale, and through a category science, data science lens, unpack what was going on. And that's exactly what we did with Snow Leopard.
Was it difficult to harmonize your thoughts and takeaways when there are three contributors?
Yeah, and let's talk about Nicholas and Eddie, right? You've known him for a while, so.
Yeah, so we get asked this question all the time, and his name is Nicholas Cole. He actually goes by Cole. We all call him Cole.
Oh, yeah, I know.
And he's a writer, well, you got to have a thing when you're a writer. So his thing is call me Cole. But here's the interesting answer to that question. We came together to write a book, and this is going to sound like I've lived on the West Coast for way too long and that I've consumed some things already this morning, which I have not, but may later. And that is, when we started to work on the book, we were instantly in flow.
In flow. Please expand on that. As an athlete, I know flow state where you're just at the right place at the right time, make right shot, pass. It's just magic. Is that what you mean?
It's magic. Yeah. And the thing about flow that's interesting is we lose ourselves in flow. We lose our self-awareness because we're so engaged in the thing. And Vala, you're right. I think a lot of us get it through sports. Runners talk about runner's high. I've run a marathon in my life and so forth. Well, the aha that we had was we get thinker's high.
Oh.
And we get going on stuff.
Man, I wish I was in the room with you. Oh my God.
That is like a jam.
Oh God.
And we do these epic jam sessions, and we do primary data science research on our own, run by Eddie Yoon. And so we take a data approach and a thinking approach to big problems and big questions and big ideas, and we jam that shit out in exactly the same way Metallica does. As a matter of fact, Metallica hired a coach named Phil Toole. And if you've ever seen the movie Some Kind of Monster, Phil's in that movie coaching Metallica. And so we bring in Phil from time to time to help coach our band too, because we think if he did such a good job with Metallica, he'd probably do a good job with us. But the amazing thing is when three people in this case get together and they care about the work, and they love working together, and we cut each other off all the time. We're not polite, and we just have at it. Amazing things happen. And what we discovered here was both data and insight. So, for example, on the data side, we studied what are the mega categories of books that sell. And it turns out there's 7 of them. And the number one best-selling category by a mile is personal development. 31% of the nonfiction books are personal development. And a lot of people in business, they want to write leadership books, and they want to write sort of my story, my biography, how we did it kind of stories. And here's the interesting thing. Leadership books are number 4. They're only 15% of nonfiction sales. And the case study, biography, how I did it, aren't I awesome books are only 9%. And the first 2 are personal development and personal finance. And so the aha here is something that many of us in marketing and category design have known for a long time, which is no one cares about us. They care about them. And if the reader is the hero in the book, now you're beginning to get something. And a lot of authors want to make themselves, particularly business authors. Business books are all about, in some cases, masturbating in public. Well, nobody wants to see that.
No.
That's amazing. That's
now there's a second. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
There's a second lens we then apply to it. So that's sort of the data. And there's a lot more data we can get into if you like. The second lens we apply to it is, okay, so what is the sort of the big aha about the book? And here's a very powerful lens. We created this thing called the content pyramid. And the top 2 parts of the content pyramid are obvious ideas and non-obvious ideas. And it turns out you can have ideas that are a combination of the 2. So the ideas that scale as measured by book sales are personal development, so it matters to me as an individual, and it has a magical combination of a non-obvious insight with an obvious applicability.
Oh, wow.
And there's a noise we want people to make.
Yeah.
And the noise goes like this. Huh? Ah. And so for example, if you look at some of the biggest impact books of the last couple decades, you go to the tipping point. Well, the tipping point, non-obvious. Before the book comes out, we don't know what that means. So that causes a huh? And then the obvious subtitle is how little things can make a big difference. Ah. You can also do it the other way around. You can have an obvious, an obvious headline and a non-obvious subtitle. And here's what doesn't work: non-obvious, because people go, "What you talking about?" And here's the other one that can work and can scale: obvious. But the interesting thing about obvious is it has a very short shelf life. So the books that start slower and build over time are almost always personal development that have a mix of non-obvious and obvious. Those are the books that tend to do the best. The obvious are when somebody needs a practical application. So for example, if you buy a fridge and you're trying to install it yourself in your house, you don't want any fucking non-obvious. You want obvious. Plug this in, do that, do this, do that, and ta-da, your fridge works, right? However, obvious has a very short shelf life and typically a one use case application. But sorry, go ahead, Ray.
No, it's completely inobvious that it's obvious. It's amazing.
But you didn't know this until the research and your latest book. Yeah. So we can make it sound like it was obvious, but unless you pour through the Nielsen data and look at the best-selling books of the last 20 years, none of this was obvious, right?
None of this was obvious. And the interesting thing about it, we did not want to do this research. We started off looking for it, and we assumed somebody had it. Both Eddie and I, our first books were published by major publishers, very big name publishers. We thought they would have this insight. Well, it turns out, according to Nielsen, nobody has done this level of category data science.
What?
To look at what are the top selling books, how do they become top selling? That is to say, their strategic use of obvious and non-obvious across the 7 categories. And so if you're building a new product, by way of example, why would this matter to you? Well, if you're building a truly breakthrough product, by definition, there's a component of it that's radically non-obvious. And your job from a category design, sales, and marketing perspective is to make your non-obvious breakthrough obvious. That is to say, tipping point, non-obvious idea, how small ideas become big things, or whatever the exact subtitle is, obvious application. And what happens in the tech world when people are building new products, new companies, and new categories is they're living in a non-obvious world. The greatest creators tend to bend to non-obvious. When Musk comes out and goes, the boring company, everybody goes non-obvious, right? And the difference between being a mad person and a legendary creator, entrepreneur, innovator is being able to take your radical non-obvious, your and turn it into a And when the goes to an at scale, you've now created a best-selling book or a best-selling product and or category dominating company.
Wow.
This is amazing. And now, hey, the counter to this was your whole notion of content-free content. Let's go there, like hammer on that point.
Yeah, so here's a question. When was the last time, let's just think about this from companies' perspective. I don't have the data in front of me, but content marketing as a category of spend in marketing is one of the biggest and fastest growing.
Sure.
It's also the one that is most commonly outsourced to a third party. Think about that for a second.
Yeah.
That's point A. Probably more importantly, let's think about this for a second. When was the last time you consumed a piece of corporate content and you went, that was fucking legendary. I'm really glad I consumed that.
Never.
Why? It's content free. And the reason it's content free is most marketing, especially content marketing, is like a Marriott lobby. Now, we've been to Marriott lobbies, right, boys?
Yes.
Yep.
They're very nice, yes.
I just stayed in one. Yes.
Yep.
Very pleasant, yes.
The scent air kicks in.
Right, and there's a nice person behind a thing, and there's a whole, and it's all very nice, right?
Yep.
And when was the last time you walked into a Marriott lobby and you texted somebody and went, this fucking lobby's incredible. I can't wait to stay here. So most content, whether it's from an individual creator or especially from a company, is purpose-built to be beige. And it's radically obvious. So go read some company's white paper on digital transformation. And they're going to start with most digital transformation projects fail. Here's why they fail. Number one, not enough executive commitment. And then they're going to go through a list of obvious stupidities that if you've been in business for more than 20 seconds, you knew all of this. And you go, why the fuck am I reading this obvious garbage? And that is probably 98% of corporate content marketing.
And
so the question is, if you're a company, what's your radically different point of view around a giant problem that matters? And how do you bring that point of view to life with a great mix of non-obvious with obvious application, as opposed to regurgitating crap that we've all read and heard over and over and over again? And oh, by the way, dear Internet, it's September 2022. Can we stop posting photos of ourselves, quoting ourselves? Can we just do that now? Are we done with that? We good on that one? Right? Again,
that's a good New Year's resolution.
It's Wednesday. Go for it. We don't need you to post a photo of yourself telling us it's Wednesday and to go for it. We're good. Content.
Yep. Okay. So you, I want to expand on this in terms of advice to business leaders on how to think more clearly, more relevant, and how to be better communicators. You wrote Peter Drucker is considered father of modern business management. If there was a Mount Rushmore of business thinkers, he'd be on it. And so the category pirates have decided to study Drucker's work and the evolution of his concepts of a knowledge worker. Can you talk to us about what was it about Drucker that pulled you three into now doing another potentially deep analysis, maybe a book, who knows? But, tell us about the project.
Yeah, so this is the new big thread that we're pulling on. It will ultimately turn into a book.
Breaking news on DisrupTV.
Breaking news. We're always working on the next one. Here's the big unlock. So Drucker, for me, had massive, massive value. And I read him very early. I got thrown out of school at 18. I had to, try shit. I had to have mentors, and I had to read shit. And so when I discovered Drucker, it changed everything for me.
Wow.
Drucker was the first person to create the category called knowledge worker. Mm-hmm. And the insight at the time, which is very clear today, of course, non-obvious, now very obvious, but non-obvious at the time, which is the vast majority of people make money with their muscles. A knowledge worker is somebody who makes money with their mind.
Get paid for your mind. Yeah.
Correct. Now, here's the paradigm of knowledge work. I go to school or some kind of training. I acquire that knowledge. I then get a job because I acquired that knowledge well. I can show grades against that. Again, comparison game, right? And I now get a, quote, good paying job, often by the hour or certainly by time, applying the knowledge that I acquired in the past to a situation in the present. And the greatest jobs you could get, what did your mother want you to be? I want you to be a doctor, right? Or a lawyer, or a nurse, or a pharmacist, or an accountant, right? Or in my case, a government employee, because then you had a pension, right? Job for life and a union and a pension. I'd rather have a hockey puck to the balls, but that's a different conversation. Okay. And then you had your entire career where what you did was apply knowledge that you learned in school, and you got ongoing credits for state keeping fresh and this and that and the other. And you were somebody who traded your knowledge in time.
Yep.
Well, guess what? That was all analog. We're now at the greatest change in the history of the definition of what a human being is, since human beings went from being hunter-gatherers to farmers. Because the three of us are among the last ever native analogs. We're the last generation to grow up where our primary life experience is the analog world, aka the physical world. Yep. And even though the three of us have had long, very illustrious careers in the digital world, our primary experience is still analog, and our secondary experience, as rich as it is digital. Well, guess what? If you're my partner, Cole, it's the inverse of that.
Wow.
And so native analogs, as we know them, have existed for roughly 130,000 years. Native digitals have existed for roughly 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And it is a radical shift in the fundamental definition of what a human being is. Now, why does this matter as it relates to intellectual capital? In the past, if you wanted to create something new, the analog barriers to entry were significant.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Today, you can create digital intellectual capital, wrap it in some differentiation, aka a category, and scale that. And so here's the big aha. Because of the shift from native analog to native digital, we are now shifting from the most valuable, impactful jobs in our world are no longer knowledge workers, because we can all do this. Hey, Siri, how many home runs did Babe Ruth hit? Now, we can't say, hey, Siri, before I do the heart surgery, where do I make the incision? So we're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
But the unlock here is that the greatest jobs in the world are no longer acquire and apply knowledge jobs. The greatest jobs in the world are
Creativity.
Create net new knowledge, aka intellectual capital, and scale it digitally. And so the future belongs to the native digital intellectual capitalist.
Amazing.
And there will be more destruction in the S&P 500 market cap in the next 10 years because the average age of the S&P 500 CEO is 58.
Yes.
The reason our government doesn't work is because the vast majority of people in government are governing a world that does not exist. The reason our education system doesn't work is because we are training people for an analog world that doesn't exist, and they don't want to do the bitch work, knowledge worker jobs that we did. They want to be intellectual capitalists. And the vast majority of native analogs have no idea what we just talked about.
Wow. Hey, before we go, I can't let you go without
powerful.
talking about Jake and MMA. What's up with Jake Paul and MMA?
Jake Paul.
He's fighting De Silva, right? Is he?
Jake Paul's fighting Anderson Silva, and Jake
Silva.
Paul is a legendary example of this. The entire fight world is, I follow a traditional analog path. I work my way up. I earn my way up. And after 15 professional fights, if I'm really amazing, I hopefully beg I beg a promoter for a shot at the title. Jake Paul says, fuck all that. He goes out and he builds his own digital world. He becomes a digital creator and creates net new intellectual capital, builds a radical audience and millions of dollars doing it, turns himself into his own promoter and starts calling out professional fighters. And before you know it, he hasn't worked his way up the system. He didn't beg Dana White for a contract. He didn't do any of that stuff. He is a self-made native digital intellectual capitalist who's now monetizing analog events in the digital world, and he has created a whole new category of native digital combat sports athlete.
That's true. Yeah, and it doesn't matter whether you like him or you hate him.
He can afford to pay Anderson Silva. There are numbers out there that says he's guaranteeing Anderson Silva $10 million.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Well, if that's true, I would guarantee you virtually that the likelihood Anderson ever had a guaranteed $10 million fight is pretty much zero. And so you have a 20-something-year-old quote-unquote kid who, because of the fact that he has approached this through a native digital lens, and there are no rules when you create your own intellectual capital in a new category of digital entertainer. So he's gone and done that, and now the audience is there. And when he fights Anderson Silva, I'm buying the pay-per-view.
And Silva, for those of you who don't know, Silva is a legend, an absolute legend. He had a long streak, maybe one of the longest in MMA of wins.
Most people consider him the greatest pound-for-pound fighter ever.
Yeah, no, definitely. And he had a gruesome leg injury that kind of sidelined him. I mean, a gruesome leg. He just compound fracture based on a kick. So I believe if it wasn't for that, he would have had even a more illustrious career.
Absolutely. But the point here is, there's a Jake Paul coming in every space.
Yep. Look at Live in golf.
Correct. And so you're either going to be that intellectual capitalist who harnesses the native digital world, or you're going to be like most native analogs who are fighting with their employees to get them to, quote unquote, come back to work. Come back to work. If you're a native analog, work is not a physical place. It's a digital space. And the minute you say come back to work, you're just demonstrating how far out of touch you are with the native digital world.
Wow. All right. We're here with legendary legend, Christopher Lochhead, 12-time #1 bestseller, #1 biz podcaster, and category designer. His new book, Snow Leopard, along with his two friends, Cole and, what's the other guy? Sorry.
Eddie. The legendary Eddie Yoon. By the way, how great is it that his name is Eddie? Not Edward, not Ed. His name is Eddie. Eddie.
I love that.
Eddie. I love that. I'll follow at Lochhead. And of course, we'll see you in Half Moon Bay, I hope. We'll work that out.
Oh, yes. I'm coming whether you invite me or not.
Oh, great speaking with you. I'm going to grow my hair.
And Vala have a legendary Dreamforce. What you guys do at Dreamforce is beyond legendary. It's an inspiration to the entire industry. It's for a vendor to have the most important event in our industry is an extraordinary achievement. Hats off to you, Benioff, and of course, everybody at Salesforce. Have a legendary Dreamforce.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Man, he always expands my mind. Always. I always walk away speaking of expanding our minds, Ross Dawson, futurist, parallel entrepreneur, keynote speaker, author of 5 books, including his latest book, which we all need. I surely need, Thriving on Overload. Ross is globally recognized as a leader, futurist, keynote speaker, entrepreneur, best-selling author. Ross is in strong demand globally, having delivered keynote speeches and strategy workshops as well, not just keynotes, in over 30 countries across 6 continents for the biggest companies in the world. Just list the largest market cap companies, and Ross has been in front of them. Ross is founding chairman of the Advanced Human Technologies Group of companies and founders of the Bondi innovation. His latest book is Thriving on Overload, The 5 Powers for Success in a World of Exponential Information, which I believe came out last week, if I'm not mistaken.
This week.
Ross, this week, September 6th. That's right, this week. Ross has been named as one of the most influential people in the world in the future of work, fintech, crowdfunding, Enterprise 2.0, and by Digital Media Magazine as one of the 40 biggest players in Australia's digital age. You can follow him on Twitter, early adopter, first and last name, Ross Dawson, RossDawson. Welcome, Ross, to DisrupTV.
Hey, awesome to be here. So
Thank you for joining us.
I was actually really encouraged by what Christopher was saying, because I think that it kind of fits his template. So the thriving on overload is personal development. Thriving on overload, Oh,
that's right. Those sounds are going to come out of every chapter of your book. Absolutely. That's right. It's great to have you.
Now in play. So, but hey, Ross, really good to have you here. It's been a long time since seeing you in person, and definitely one of legendary futurists, and of course, very, very pragmatic approaches to business and business transformation and change. You've been there. You pointed out a fact that in 2020, 66% of Americans were worn out, right? I'm sure everybody around the world was as well, with the news, with the information, all the channels, right? This is really one of those things that have kind of been, taxing our time. And you say that this surplus can actually be used to our own advantage. So what do you mean by that?
So it's just a fact that we have a finite amount of cognitive capacity. Human brain is the most amazing thing in the known universe. It's absolutely incredible, but it is finite. It is limited in lots of ways. We can measure them, in fact, how limited it is. And we live in a world which is essentially infinite, unlimited information. So this doesn't work. We can't cope. We can't keep up. In fact, if we try to keep up, then we're going to lose that game. So the issue is, how do we turn that around? And it really starts from changing our mindset. From, instead of saying, okay, well, we have, I'm always going to be behind. I'm always going to be stressed. I'm always going to be overwhelmed. We can say, well, whatever my objectives are, I have all of the information I could possibly want to achieve my objectives. So it's shifting to abundance. So you can pick and choose what it is which will support your objectives and discount the rest. And obviously that's a little easier said than done. But this is really starts from that mindset. We can thrive on overload or unlimited information. In fact, every person every successful entrepreneur, everybody that's achieved in business or entrepreneurships or in corporate world is good at this already. They're already excellent at thriving on a massive amount of information. So these are what I call the information masters. But all of us, me, and even though both of you are absolutely information masters, you can also improve. Everybody can also identify what are the ways from where I am now, I can improve. And I try to just lay that out as much as possible in the framework in the book. These are the elements, these are the way they fit together, these are the practices, these are the ways in which we can refine and get better at what is basically the fundamental skill for success in the world today.
Yeah. No, I appreciate your kind words. I see Ray on mainstream media, television, almost daily, talking about vast variety of topics. So he's definitely an information master. I have to be selectively ignorant about many things so that I can actually try to deeply understand some things. So I don't consider myself information master, but I want to talk about, so you have a reputation of being able to frame concepts where people can relate to it, they can understand it. You have an ability to articulate very clearly your trends and vision and potential outcomes that come to fruition. So I want to talk about, or can you talk to us about the 5 powers that can help us manage information overload? And it could be any one of the 5 that you think is most important, or as many as you'd like to cover.
Well, the subtitle says the 5 powers. So the 5 powers are purpose, which is basically knowing why. Why on earth do I want information at all in the first place? What is it I want to achieve? Second is framing, really fundamental one, which is building the knowledge frameworks that support our understanding. Third is filtering, to be able to get better at discerning what is useful and not useful. Attention, which I think is really critical, is sort of saying it's not just we've got attention, we don't have attention, but these how do we allocate our attention in different ways with intention so that we know why we are doing that. And finally, synthesis, which is that master capability of taking all of those pieces and pulling them together to make sense. And I think one which is perhaps a little less evident than the others, and I think all of these are things which people are familiar with, but one which is done less, and you alluded to that, Vala, is framing, is building the knowledge frameworks. Because we're exposed to all this information, and just being aware of that information doesn't help us. We need to piece that together to build our mental models, to build the frameworks for understanding, to be able to see, have a model where as information comes in, we can say, that fits there, or that doesn't fit, so I better adjust my model. And you can having those frameworks are fundamental to be able to filter information coming in on all sides, and are also just one of these basic foundations where we can use visual frameworks. So it's just actually listening to another cognitive psychologist on a podcast this morning, just around just all of the weight of evidence that visualization and spatial representation are in fact the foundation for our cognition, the way in which we pull together ideas, the way we perceive the world. So we can facilitate that by building frameworks explicitly. And that becomes an extraordinarily accelerator, an enabler of the pace and extent to which we can build constructive knowledge.
Ross, I don't remember learning frameworks in school, undergrad or grad. Maybe if I pursued my doctorate, I would have learned framing. But and it's what our prior guest talked about, just things that are lacking in education. Did you ever have classes? Or did you...
Well, no, never. So I've got a few bits of education along the way, but I'm basically an autodidact. I teach myself stuff. Yeah. Yes. But I mean, that's one of the things that just from when I was young, I was kind of like crazy. Why aren't we teaching this most fundamental skill of all? This ability to learn, to how to learn, the ability
learning how to learn and then communicate your fun. Ray and I have our eldest are now sophomores in great schools, and we're both paying a bit of a tuition. These are great schools. And when I listen to thought leaders like yourself and folks that have accomplished big things, and again, I don't mean, it's like our previous guest, there's obvious things that you are teaching us. And I'm like, but they're not obvious, because I went through 7 years of schooling after high school and I didn't learn any of this. So,
one of the reasons why we have to change, introduce these into our formal education from K to 12 to, graduate, postgraduate, and lifelong learning, is that this is in fact not just fundamental to our ability to do the intellectual capitalism work that Christopher talked about, which is the foundation of basically all work today. It is actually fundamental to our democracy. One of the reasons why democracy is getting even more broken these days is that people are not able to make sense of and to vote, make choices around who to vote for in a world of overwhelm, which is subject not only to misinformation and disinformation, but just simply too much, can't process, not able to participate in a democratic society, which I want to make. And so the future of our democratic world includes the ability to help people to handle all of this.
It's a great point, right? I mean, we cannot make logical decisions anymore. The overload's intentional to push on emotional buttons, and we lose sight of what a probable model looks like, or what probabilities, or what spectrums are. And you touch upon this very clearly when you talk about the 6 attention modes. Let's talk a little bit about that, because I mean, when you are overloaded, you don't realize which attention modes have you been hit on. And so let's talk. Yeah, let's start there.
So the key point here is that it's not as if we either are focused or not focused. Our attention has many different guises, and we need to understand that there are different attention modes. So we're thinking about information, how we deal with information, identify 6 different modes which we need to engage with. One is scanning, to look through all of the headlines, all the things out there to pick out what is it that might be interesting to me. Second is assimilating, where we're actually, okay, I'm sitting down. I found something which is really useful. I'm going to sit down, I'm going to assimilate that into my frameworks, into my mental models, into my thinking. So you're spending some time with that. You've got exploring. So you're saying, okay, well, I've got my usual sources. I'm going to venture out somewhere else and find some other stuff, but do it in a way which is not just sort of wandering around, is where you design the serendipity. So you find the stuff which is particularly cool. You're able to stumble across things in interesting ways. You're seeking things in new ways. Deep diving, which is critical. And I think one of the things I've distilled in sort of just the quick lessons, if you say, okay, one of the few things to do out of my book, one is say everybody should have at least 2 hours every week, which is dedicated to one thing, where everything else is switched off. Nobody's going to interrupt you unless it's the end of the world. And you just keep yourself to that. Maybe a couple of breaks for 5 minutes in between. You're developing your capacity for focus, and you're just into the zone. You're not in and out as our multitasking world has led us to. You've got one time of focus. And the sixth attention mode, which is critical, is regenerating. Because, again, plenty of sciences and research has showed us that our attention degenerates. We're not able to sustain infinite attention for a long time. And regenerating, again, being demonstrated to be particularly valuable in nature. So exposing ourselves to trees or walks outside, or even looking at the clouds, or even faces of other people and engaging in conversation with other people, they're natural things as well. So these are these 6 modes, and we can time box our day. Say, okay, well, I'm going to spend enough time on scanning, but not too much. I'm going to spend some time assimilating. I'm going to spend some time deep diving. I'm going to spend some time regenerating. And this is an incredible amplifier of our productivity, to be intentional around where we put our attention through the day.
Advice. That is so. I can imagine if you were deliberate about 104 hours throughout a year, 52 weeks times 2 hours, pick a topic, something that interests you. Maybe it's an emerging technology. Maybe it's, books from great authors that you admire. 104 hours of uninterrupted time in a year. Imagine the capacity of learning and sharing. And I would say you do that a few years and you're probably in the top 1% of most topics. You could really be considered subject matter experts. Yeah, and if you find joy in it, and you have to if you want to be uninterrupted for 2 hours, I'm betting Ray hasn't had a 2-hour uninterrupted moment in the last 5 years. Okay. That's only 1 hour. That's only 1 hour. But no, it's great. So again, synthesizing is also the fifth superpower that you talk about. Can you give us an example of someone we may all know or someone you admire who's demonstrated the ability to synthesize and gain benefits from it?
Well, I suppose if you come back to who can you think of as successful? They're probably a good synthesizer. And the very obvious examples are your Elon Musks and Warren Buffetts and so on.
Sure.
Sort of take lots and lots of stuff and pull that together. Makes sense. That is part of the capability. But I think there's some categories of people who are good synthesizers. And, in particular, those, if you are working in VC, venture capital, for example, you need to be able to pull together, and to be successful in any case, you have to pull together the pieces to get a sense of how the pieces fit together not just how an existing industry landscape works, but how that can evolve over time and see how that former shape might evolve. The only way in which you can intuit a future industry landscape is through having a true rich synthesis of the current system. This is systems thinking. This is understanding how the elements interrelate. It's seeing the pieces that other people don't see and piecing those together so that you can have this. It is, synthesis, literally seeing the whole, not the pieces, pulling those together. And this is a skill which we can develop. Our analytical education, our analytical jobs and careers and structures are all around slicing and dicing things into smaller and smaller pieces. And that's eroding many people's ability natural ability to synthesize, to pull together, to see the whole. And that's, again, something which we can nurture in ourselves. And there's a series of practices in the book about how to do that.
Musk advocates first principles as a methodology that he uses to better understand the whole. Does the book reference certain models and methods of learning how to synthesize it in not a formulaic way, but a structured way?
Yeah. Well, the framing and the synthesis chapters fit together in a way. So the synthesis is, in a way, how do we access the power of our unconscious mind? So our conscious mind is analytical, the unconscious mind is synthesis, and there's many ways we can evoke those states of mind. Okay. The framing chapter looks at the different structures for frameworks. And one of them, the three basic structures I identify are trees, networks, and systems. And in fact, I use a quote that Elon Musk said. He was once asked, so how do you understand so many different things? And it says, well, you have to build a kind of tree of knowledge. You have to know what the trunk is. You need where the branches are, and so you can know where the other branches fit and where the leaves and the fruit become. And so that structure of a tree or a hierarchy is one model. Another framework is the networks, in saying this whole lattice of how these ideas connect. And the other is the systems, where you get the positive and the balancing feedback loops. And all of these structures, or mental structures, or ways in which you are building concepts together into a model, are fundamental to this seeing of the whole, to the synthesis, to be able to build solid mental models of the world.
Now, you talk about this need of developing information overload work capabilities to improve not just our minds, but our physical well-being. I'm thinking about this also helps our mental health, right? Up to 250,000 people are suffering from mental illness. It takes about $1 trillion off the global economy. Talk about how this could help.
Well, there's a couple of aspects of that. One is simply that if we are in a state of overwhelm, this triggers unfortunate balance of neurochemicals activating our amygdala, moves into a fight and flight response, and we are less cognitively able, so we're less able to deal with the overwhelm. So there's a very negative cycle which we get engaged with. So one of the first things is we do need to take those initial steps. One is coming back to that mindset that we talked about at the beginning, getting off this frame of feeling you have to keep up, because keeping up is impossible. So don't try to do it. So that's the first step. And to be able to, obviously, some of the things chunk down. All right, let's chunk down from the many, many things that got to keep on trough of, to here are a few. This is something which is contained, and pulling that back. But I think another key aspect of this, if we think about our purpose for dealing with information, one of the critical aspects of that is our well-being. Our information that feeds our ability to be well, to be healthy, mentally and physically, should be part of our information diet. So we're building that fundamental understanding of what it is we can do, how it is we can shift our habits to keep across new information over time. So this ability to deal well with overload of information is, in fact, really fundamental to our physical well-being and, of course, our mental well-being.
How long have you been using these 5 building blocks to shape your content and thinking and the futurist work that you do? And the follow-up is, at what point did you realize that, I need to write a book? What was the reason for you to write this, your 5th book? Was it a aha moment that, oh, wow, when I reflect on the success I've had 5 muscles that I've been using that's helped me deliver content that people care about. And so I'm interested to know the process of writing the book and what was the catalyst behind it.
So the ideas are 25 years old. Well, they're really longer, but that's when I've got evidence. I did write down Thriving on Information Overload somewhere on a piece of paper 25 years ago. And at the time,
that's awesome.
At the time, great. I was my first company. And I just had my first company. My first service was going to investment banks and says, I'm going to help train your dealers and research analysts and so on how to create value from unlimited information. And I was a little ahead of my time, unfortunately, but I had all programs. And I did run some workshops, and I did do some work with a number of clients around that at the time. And then so this was always something which was there. Then in 2009, I registered the domain Thriving on Overload.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, in the future.
Wow. 25 years ago, you had the idea. 12 years ago, you registered. Oh, my goodness. So this, I kind of feel sad because I feel like your next greatest hit is going to be 10 years from now. I mean, that's amazing. That's amazing how much it's been percolating with you. Wow, this is great.
I remember a discussion at the White Horse in Surrey Hills.
Oh, wow, yes.
We were talking about this.
Oh, right.
Wow.
And we talked about this
in a decade ago.
Like 2010 or 11, maybe even 2012.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've been baking this delicious book for years.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, if you're wanting the story, in fact, I wrote a proposal for a different book about. So my book was about how to see and create the future, and so it was all this. I spent ages on writing the proposal, got it out to these top agents, and all of the agents told me, "Can't sell this book. It's really hard to sell books about the future." But one agent who was brilliant, Jim Levine, he said, "There's one chapter title in this proposal. It's called Thriving on Overload. If you make that into a book, I can sell that." And so the thing was,
and Jim Levine is the legendary business book agent.
Yeah.
One of the top.
So the magic of it was that I wrote Thriving on Overload, and in fact, I've included just about everything I was going to write in the original book about seeing and creating the future anyway, because it really is about how do we make sense of information to be able to see the future.
That's awesome.
Oh my God, this is going to be funny. I'm looking at the endorsements, and I can't remember what I wrote for you. And then I'm looking at this, and Chris Lochhead would love this. A great refactoring is among us. Digital natives are competing with legacy analogs in almost every aspect of our lives.
Right.
How we harness both the plethora and the power of information will determine the winners and losers in this dynamic economy. This must-read book shares the pragmatic secrets of how to overcome being overwhelmed and how to own information. Turn information into an unfair advantage.
I want to know all the sticky notes that Ross has right now with ideas of next books. That's awesome. That's very cool. Wow.
We are here with one of the top futurists in the world, Ross Dawson, parallel entrepreneur, keynote speaker, and author of 5 books, including this new one that came out 3 days ago, Thriving on Overload. Check it out wherever books are sold, and of course, Amazon. So thanks a ton for being
here, Ross.
And following Ross Dawson. So
thank you.
Thanks.
You are getting an executive MBA on steroids every week here at DisrupTV.
You really are. You really are. And with both guests, I'm not ashamed to say we could have had a 2-hour conversation, 2 hours with both of them. I couldn't stop listening to both, and I would have loved to deep dive into all 5 elements, all the 6 attention models, and ultimately, like, what can I do right now to be able to synthesize better? Again, I don't have the training in terms of how to frame complex topics into something that's digestible, that potentially can be actioned upon. I just think about all the schooling and even the early career where, as Chris said, most of us kind of rented our time. We were given tasks with very little to no equity. And we just kind of nose to the ground, get the job done, 8 to 5. It was never 8 to 5 for me because as immigrants, we have different maybe work ethics. For me, a 60-hour week was a light week. But anyway, Ray, your takeaways of 2 extraordinary people that have just spent an hour expanding our minds.
Well, you know what? This is part of the great refactoring. What we are seeing is that those who see a brand new path, who are willing to pioneer a brand new path, are doing it, right? And these are some of the next set of management gurus and leaders in the world. Sometime last week, I was sitting with a friend, and we're just like, we're looking at conferences, looking at keynote speakers. We're like, where did all the management gurus go? Like all the people we used to revere, like they've all retired. Some of them have passed, right? Some have left things around. They're just not all there anymore, and they've all retired. A great generation of management thinkers are gone. And then, as we're talking about this, like this 25-year-old walks in and says, "Aren't you guys those people?" We're like, no. I don't even think we come to that level of greatness.
Wow.
But these folks, really, like in another meeting about 4 weeks ago, where I go to the person next to me and I say, "Oh my God, we're the grown-ups in the room. This meeting's like a complete, S show." It's like, what the hell's going on here, right? And the girl comes to me and says, "You're the adult in the room. Can you go fix this?" I'm like, "Oh, So, I don't know.
You know, we're going to have Tom Peters back on our show. When I think of living legends, when I hear of names like Clay Christensen, Peter Drucker, and Tom Peters, and we're fortunate that we both know him. He's been on our show multiple times. In fact, the only show that cracked 200,000 views on DisrupTV has been Tom Peters. And he came, even the second appearance came close. So he's one of our most popular guests, and he's a living legend, in my opinion.
We're going to build the next set of legends here. Vala, we are. We got Ross Dawson, Chris Lochhead.
Yeah.
Who else? I mean, who's coming next week?
Okay. So you say that, and this is not coincidental. It may appear coincidental, but this next name that I'm going to talk about on our show next week is one of the deepest thinkers we know, Byron Reese, who's the CEO of J.J. Kent and author of Stories, Dice, and Rocks That Think. I love that title because it makes no sense to me. The not so obvious, and I'm sure the byline will be obvious, but clearly Byron, who's a best-selling author, knows how to create that moment of grabbing attention. And then John Landry and Howard Wolk, who are authors of Launchpad Republic. So we have three fantastic authors.
That is an amazing book. It's about America's edge and why it matters, right? Why we have the entrepreneurial edge in this country, right?
Awesome.
So maybe we are seeing the next set of Renaissance thinkers. I hope.
You know, it's Ray. This was episode 292. We crossed 900 interviews with Chris and Ross. They were 900 and 901. So surely when you look at the roster of the 900 interviews, there are definitely legendary thinkers. And it's a privilege for you and I to have the opportunity to learn from these folks. You and I, 1 hour a week, even though you're on TV every day talking to, big wigs. I look at my Twitter stream and you guys are like hugging Tim Cook and yourself, which is like, wow, that's my co-host with Tim Cook. That's pretty awesome. So, even though, we think we're doing, decent amount of good work, the caliber of folks that come and share their knowledge with us are just
we have amazing guests. If you got suggestions, please let us know. We're looking for them every week. And of course, thank you for being part of this bigger Disrupt TV community. So
thank you, everyone. If it's Friday, it's Disrupt. See you next week. Cheers.